Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Jennifer Wren Tolo, and today's episode, how one nurse's personal journey helped her bridge the wellness gap in healthcare. Tired of feeling trapped in a job that no longer fulfills you? Is your nursing job no longer the fun-filled adventure you imagined? Find your passion again through nurse entrepreneurship. Step out into the light and come feel the sun. Join the Nurse Shark Academy today at thenurssharkacademy.biz and come feel the sun. Hello and welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Join us each time to support these wonderful nurses and entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest is Jennifer Wren Tolo from Butterfly Family Wellness of Essex, Massachusetts. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks for having me.
So, as always, we like to start off the show with finding out a little bit about your nursing background. So, what made you become a nurse?
I've always been drawn to people, to helping people, to just kind of nurturing people, I guess. My mom was a nurse. I was always told, you're smart. Why don't you become a doctor? But I realized one of the things, I mean, you have to be smart to be a nurse too, but one of the things that really drew me to nursing was that you've got this diagnosis or you have this problem. Let me support you and help you in recuperating. I liked the people part of it. And I went into critical care nursing right out of college, actually. And I wouldn't recommend that for new nurses, but yeah, I was a cardiothoracic ICU nurse. I did neuro ICU, surgical trauma ICU. And then I went into nursing supervisor. I was a nursing supervisor, and boy, did that leave a pit in my stomach every day when I'd walk out of the hospital, not being able to really staff and care for the nurses. Because let's face it, without the nurses, it's hard for the healthcare system to go around. So what really drew me to nursing, though, to answer your question, was really, I've always wanted to help people. I've always been interested in medicine. I've always been interested in, nurturing and health and wellness. And this was just my way of doing that and having some balance in my life as well.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And I hear that a lot from nurses, the desire to help. And maybe there was a family member that was in nursing or the medical field that drew you into the profession. I'm curious, where did you start your training? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, I went to University of Virginia. I got my bachelor's from UVA. And then I got a master's degree. It's funny because if you had asked me while I was in nursing school, if I wanted to go back, and if I did go back to a graduate school, what I'd do, I would have been a nurse practitioner. But then and I'm glad that I worked as a nurse first before going right into graduate school, because I was realizing that one of the things that I was frustrated by was the management. So I went to school and I got a master's in administration because I thought I was going to change healthcare that way. And funny, I did like a little stint on the side. I did risk management for a little while because my dad was an attorney and I've always been kind of interested in the legal aspects. But I went into it was actually after I got married and I was going to graduate school. I took a job in risk management, hospital risk management, and I was shocked at how, let's just say, even though I was working for the doctors, how hated I was. Like, people just did not want to see my face coming at them. They didn't want to talk because I realized how litigious medicine was. And
Yes.
Yeah, and how, people aren't, doctors, surgeons, nurses are not allowed to make any mistakes. So yeah, it was amazing. I've sort of had a nice 360 view, I think, of medicine in my life.
Well, let's back up a little bit because there's a couple things to unpack there. The first
Yeah.
is that foray into middle management and supervisor.
Oh
That's
yeah.
not an easy role because you're there. You're responsible for staffing and trying to keep the staff happy, but you can't keep them too happy because you got to keep the
Right.
administration and the bottom line happy.
Right.
So you have a lot of responsibility, but
Yeah.
not a lot of power.
That is so well said, and that was probably my biggest frustration. As a matter of fact, I remember working in a smaller community hospital. When I worked in New York City at a bigger hospital, I just was the critical care nursing supervisor. And then in a community setting for a community hospital, when we moved up to Massachusetts, um, I was in charge of basically all the nursing units. And I found it so frustrating because we wouldn't have staff, but we had beds. And even though I would tell the upper management, we don't have the staffing, we have to stop, the patients coming in from the ER or slow this down. They're like, you can't turn away an assignment. And I remember as a nurse, as a critical care nurse, I remember they built these new ICU units and they were gorgeous and they were paid for by somebody's lovely donation, but they wanted these private rooms, these deep private rooms. And to be honest with you, as a nurse, you had more than one patient because of the staffing. And when you had these deep private rooms, it wasn't safe really taking care of these patients because you could not see them. I missed the old rooms where you'd have 2, 3, 4 patients in one little bay, and that was your responsibility, but you had eyes on them at all times. And so, you know, I feel like people don't understand those aesthetics, but we were told you're not allowed to turn down an assignment. That's your job. You cannot turn down an assignment. So even as a nurse, and I think this is one of the reasons why I started slowly exiting from bedside nursing, was my license is on the line, but yet I have no control over what I'm doing and where I'm going and how I'm caring for patients. I mean, they told you you can put up on these monitors your other patients' vitals so you could keep an eye on them. I'm like, great, but it doesn't show me if they're pulling out their ET tube or if they're pulling out their IV or seizing, or it's not going to necessarily show me that. It'll show me the artifact. But anyway, so those are the kinds of things that made me want to be more of an advocate for nurses, which made me want to go into nursing administration. But unfortunately, you're right, there's your middle management, so you have all these to-dos, and again, still feeling a little powerless, right? Still feeling like I see the problem, but no one's listening. No one wants to hear what I think the solution could be. So
I,
that was very frustrating.
I know when I was in management and supervisor, I was tasked with doing the scheduling
Yeah. Oh yeah.
for the adult unit. So that meant, begging, pleading, bribing nurses to take extra shifts.
Yeah.
We had a float pool, but if they didn't pick up, then, you had to find somebody to work the floor. And, it's a busy psychiatric unit, and we don't turn people away either unless there's a really good reason for it. Like we
Yeah.
just can't, for safety reason, can't take another
Right.
patient. But
Right.
I've had ICU doctors, no shade to ICU doctors, but I had them yell at us because we wouldn't take a patient. And we're like,
Yeah.
hey, he's medically unstable. He can't come to a psychiatric unit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we said, I'll tell
Right.
you what, we'll trade you. We'll give
Right.
you this guy, one of our guys in seclusion, if you send on your guy. And he was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. I said, okay, well, I don't have a bed. He actually told me to kick one of my patients out to make a bed for his patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't do that,
Yeah.
doc. Sorry.
No. No. Yeah, and these are the things that people outside, because then we're also getting the complaints from, as a supervisor, I would kind of always try to support my nurses. So when they were swamped, I would go to the floors and try to help out if they were having trouble with a family member, or patient, I would go and help and support them. But that's the thing is, you're dealing with people where people feel powerless. People feel like stuff is happening to them and they don't have control. And when people don't have control, they they start to decompensate it. It creates this fight or flight. It creates this stress situation. And it just keeps feeding, and then people react. And so you have people reacting, and the doctors are barking at the nurses because they're reacting when things aren't going the way they want. You have patients reacting to the nurses. You have staff members reacting to each other, and it can just be such a stressful and volatile, you know environment to work. And I
Yes.
mean, my first job as a critical care nurse, and I say this to my students because now I teach in a school of nursing, but I say to my students, when I first started working, I worked in a cardiothoracic ICU right out of school, right out of nursing school. And I was smart, I was eager, I wanted to learn. But I remember when my first patient started to crash, and the older nurses just kind of swooping in, pushing me out of the way and trying to take over. And I was like, whoa, 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 this is my patient. Like, walk me through it. Don't take over. I'm not going to learn that way. But it was almost like they wanted me to fail. It was there was so much competition and vying for, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like, instead of nurturing and supporting the new nurses coming in, it was like they were just trying to rip them apart. And it was just such a toxic environment. And I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, this is sucking my soul right now. So I left and went to surgical trauma, and that was better. But again, it was just like the whole environment. I thought, okay, this is not sustainable. This lifestyle is not sustainable.
Well, that brings up that whole other phenomenon in nursing that we've talked about before in the show, that nurse bullying, and
Mm,
that whole notion of nurses eating their young.
yeah,
And we need to change that narrative and do so much better with that. And I remember being a brand new nurse and was bullied by my manager a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Um, that I don't know what to say about that person. Uh, Bless her heart, but she was a really big bully. I mean, to the point
yeah,
that when I was leaving and getting a promotion at another hospital, she just looked at me in my face and said, "Do you think you're really ready to be a supervisor?" I said, "Well, they must think I'm ready because they hired me."
yeah,
I mean, it's those types of comments,
yeah,
and then the not wanting to show you things. And I remember being in nursing school, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but back when I was coming out of school, the hospitals were playing this game of firing or laying off all the seasoned nurses and hiring new grads at cheaper wages.
oh
And
yeah,
so none of the nurses at the hospital would train us. When we were in clinicals, they were just like, we were on the peds floor and they wouldn't let us touch a patient. We could talk to a patient. It was horrible.
yeah,
It was such a bad experience. And the professors knew it.
yeah,
But there was nothing we can do about it. And it kind of turned me off from that hospital, actually.
yeah.
They offered me a job there, but there's a whole lot of stuff that happened that I just didn't feel good about taking a job there. And I'm kind of glad I didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I see my students now that are working so hard, and they're focused on the money, but they're burning themselves out. So they're taking double shifts, but then going to school, and they are not healthy. Because that's another thing. How many nurses do we see that are not healthy, that are not walking the walk? Because I mean, I read something too, even in medical school, you have these people that are supposed to teach people how to be healthy, but they're not leading healthy lifestyles. They're not sleeping. They're not
Mhm.
managing their stress. They're not eating right. They're not exercising. So yeah, there's a lot of things broken in the system, inside out.
And unfortunately, in the system, we're told to be quiet about it, right?
Mm,
They
yeah,
a lot of times they preach it as self care, wellness, But say that you need a day for self care or wellness and see if you get the day off. Or you
Yeah.
don't get a side eye
Yeah.
because you aren't working through your lunch and you dare complain about it.
Yeah. 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 Or
It's,
yeah.
yeah, that's just some of the realities of being in healthcare. And I have to say, it wasn't always like that. Because I
Yeah.
remember when I started, I was working as a CNA in long term care, and we actually got our breaks. I got two breaks and a lunch,
Mm, yeah.
and sometimes was fed by the facility
Yeah.
for $1, but that's going way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I do think it depends. And if we can have more organizations, more healthcare centers that value, right,
Hmm.
health and well-being of their employees, then I mean that's across the board, whether you're in medicine, business, like whatever it is, it,
Yes.
we have to start prioritizing health and well-being over dollars and productivity, because the productivity will come, and the care and the innovation will come when you have people showing up as their best selves, and that only happens when they take care of themselves. So yeah.
Well, I have to say, I think that went downhill when we had that big push for 12-hour shifts. When we
Yeah,
had
but
three
12 hours.
8-hour shifts, it was a
Yeah.
lot easier to manage having a little bit of time off.
Yeah.
You had a little bit of a break between going back. So doing doubles, working several days in a row wasn't as bad
Yeah.
because you had time to get off and go with your family or whatever you needed to do.
Yeah.
You worked your 8 and you're out.
See, I liked working the 12s because you'd work your 12s, you'd work 3 days, 4 days, and you had more days off. Um, I didn't mind working the 12s.
It depends because when I worked the floor, you would do your 12-hour shift, but you may have to stay and work 16. And then the next day I had to do another double. And then the next day I had to do another double
Yeah,
because
those.
I was on call and it was just horrible.
Yeah, that's tough. That is tough. Yeah. Well, and you know what was tough for me is the rotation of days and nights. I mean, I know there are certain nurses that like working nights, and then there's most people want to work days. But as a new nurse, you had to do days
Yeah.
and I didn't know when I was coming or going, so that really messed up my schedule. And I have a really good friend of mine now who's a respiratory therapist, and it's the same for her. She still has to do these, and she's like top, she's an ECMO therapist, and she's like management and everything, and she still has to do these rotations to cover nights and weekends. And yeah, I mean, it's hard. There's a lot of sacrifice that
Yeah.
goes on to being in the healthcare industry. There just is. You
So
don't go into it because you want this glorious life, right?
I think a lot of times that this is what we've kind of painted the picture of
Hmm.
on TikTok and Instagram, that this glamorous life of coming in, becoming a nurse, being a travel nurse, going to
Yeah.
these exotic places and making this big money and getting the bag. And we
Yeah.
promote that and we forget about the work, the care, the things that you need to do. And so I want us to be more balanced because we need to show the realities of what's
Yeah.
happening in healthcare and nursing, but we
Yes.
also want to talk about the good things. And so I want to talk about one of the I want to say what a story or an event that you remember most in your nursing career when you were at the bedside that you're most proud of.
I think, and I can't really think of one specific patient right now. I remember, I do. I remember this young, and at the time when I was a critical care nurse in New York City, I was in my 20s. And I remember this 21, 22-year-old young man coming in with a gunshot wound who was flown in. He was actually in South America. He was working for his father, and he got flown in, treated there, but it wasn't, it was like quickly treated. And then he was flown to us. Um, Not really sure why he was flown to our hospital. I can't remember. There was some connection to our hospital, but I remember just seeing this person that was close to my age, that, attractive young man trying to like just help out his family. He was down there working, and like, so I remember just thinking like, wow, like this is awful, because he was shot, robbed and shot. So it wasn't
Mm.
like he wasn't into, there are some people that have gunshot wounds that put themselves in those positions.
Yes,
This
yes.
kid was just doing his job, and this happened, and he didn't have any family around him, so he was by himself. And I remember just so much empathy. But I remember being there and just, I would talk to him, and I would, when we were doing the care, I'd tell him what we were doing. And he was ventilated and not necessarily, reacting, but when he eventually woke up, I remember he just saying that he really appreciated all the nurses talking to him and people talking. Because I remember saying to one of the nurses that was just going in there, I'm like, talk to him. I was like, think
Hmm.
of this as like your kid, your brother, whatever. Talk to him. So that was one that stood out. And, I had kind of an interesting, when I was a nursing student at UVA, I was working in the neuro ICU as a CNA, and Superman came in. So Christopher Reeves had
Mm.
fallen off. So I'm dating myself, but Christopher Reeves had fallen off his horse and was being rolled in. And I remember just thinking, like, oh my God, that's Superman. Like, amazed, and just the solemn faces, because didn't look good, right? It was a C-spine injury. So
Yeah.
it was just like daunting. But I remember thinking, or remember the neurologist saying, like, you never know what's going to happen. Like the brain and everything is it's an incredible thing. And then I remember, fast forward, in my nursing career in New York, when I was on the surgical trauma unit, there was a woman who had DIC, so bleeding out everywhere. She had liposuction,
Mm.
right? And she looked like she was in a car accident. It was that kind of thing. And I remember taking care of her, and I remember thinking, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. Like, this is bad. This is bad. And then a couple months later, she walked into the ICU to thank everybody and give everybody hugs. And I was like, oh my, oh my God, that's the same woman. So like, just those kinds of miraculous recoveries, and the connecting moments, those are the ones that I will always remember. I've had some bad ones too, that I where patients were not so nice. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but those kind of rewarding moments, I would say, when you know that you made a difference for somebody, even talking to family, being there for family when somebody wasn't doing well, like, that's one of my strengths, is that connection, that soul connection piece. That's always been my strength, I think, as a nurse.
You know what? That ability to connect, that empathy that we develop as a nurse, it helps us to really be present with our patients when they're going through their worst days of their lives.
Hmm.
But it's also important for us to remember that even though we have empathy for them, not to fall into the trap of having sympathy for someone. And then, because when you do that, you kind of give all of yourself to them and you have nothing to reserve. So
Mm.
there is a little bit of a clinical detachment that you have to have,
Yeah.
as a protective mechanism for you. Otherwise, you're taking everything home with you,
Yes.
and we remember the stories. And this is what I want our audience to hear. If you are not a nurse and you never had experiences as a caretaker, but you may have been a patient, we remember you.
Yeah.
Okay. The,
Yeah.
the really sad cases, the bad cases, the
Yeah.
angry cases, we remember you. And sometimes um we may not remember everything, but we remember a lot about your story,
Yeah.
and it stays with you so much. I remember, because you were mentioning training in New York. I remember when I was in New York for 9/11.
Yeah, I was there too. Yeah.
Yes, and I'll never forget having to go see this particular person who was in the hospital. Her family, her parents were there, I think, and her brother, but her fiance broke up with her after her horrific accident. because of
Mm-hmm.
9/11. He just couldn't deal.
Mm-hmm.
This woman had to have major reconstructive surgeries. It was a lot. I don't want to. It's kind of graphic, so I don't want to get into all the stuff that happened with her.
Yeah.
But basically, the back half of her body was sheared off by part of the propeller or something like that that came down. So something metal kind of sheared the back half of her off.
Wow.
So it was very, very horrendous, her injuries. And we were going in as social health workers through the American Red Cross. I was a
Mm-hmm.
volunteer at the Red Cross at the time. And we were there to help support the family. But you think of stories like that that stick with
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Or the local postmaster who I happened to treat before he retired from the post office. And um, as he says it, I'm his angel because I saved his life because he was about to have a stroke.
Yeah.
His blood pressure was that high, and we caught it and we got him to the ER. And so
Mm.
things like that, I
Yeah.
want to hear. As nurses, those stories stick with us, and I think that's what keeps us going.
Yeah.
Even with all the stuff that's happening, and yes, there's things that need to be fixed. And I can tell you, you go to any company in the world, there's always something that needs to be fixed. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something unique and special about being in healthcare that brings us back again and again.
Well, it's the opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. You
Yes,
know,
on
I
on
think.
a tangible level, on a
Yeah.
real tangible level that you
Yeah.
can really see and feel.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I still do that, even though I'm not in the hospital setting. I'm still doing that. That's what drives me, right? Like that's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how did you transition then from being in the hospital, working in management, risk management, and all those things that we could talk about, but we don't have the time because we could talk for
Mm.
hours about this stuff. But
Yeah.
how did you
Yeah. Yeah.
transition to becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, my second son, when he was born, had a massive neonatal stroke, and it really showed me the gaps in healthcare, really showed me the areas that were lacking and the areas of support and empowerment. And so I started to, my son had right sided weakness. I became a personal trainer. I got my first health coaching certification and nutrition certification. Learned about mindfulness and just dove into whatever I needed. I became a Reiki master, so I dove into all these different things that my son was going to need. And then fast forward a couple of years, and my third son, the same day I found out I was having my fourth son, my third son was diagnosed with leukemia. Now at this point I had all the things that I needed to support him through this journey.
Mhm.
So I did Reiki on him every single day, and he never had all the bad mouth sores and side effects of chemotherapy. I knew how to be an advocate when they wanted to give him intracranial radiation because of a lab result that was showed that he was high risk. Um, I was like, wait a minute, because I knew and something in my gut, and I learned through these journeys to trust my gut. Something in my gut said, no, that's not what he needs. So I asked them to repeat the labs. My husband too. Asked them to repeat the labs, and sure enough, it was a lab error. So they were about to do something that could have completely damaged my son's brain. I was never afraid to stand up and to advocate for my kids, even when my son had the stroke and there were so many different cooks in the kitchen. There were so many different doctors. And I remember just saying, hey, can you guys all communicate? Can we come up with one plan instead of you guys doing this and you guys doing this? So, my management piece came out that way. But it really showed me the gaps in healthcare. And when I first started my business, I was really starting as a health coach, doing a lot of education, going into schools, working with kids, a lot of education about nutrition and preventative stuff. But what I found in all of, I've been doing this now for about 18 years. And what I found was really the answers and the transformation behind health and well being. I was focusing on physical and nutritional health, even a little bit environmental health. But really, for me now, I focus on emotional and spiritual health and well being. I really focus on helping people connect to what the hidden stressors are in their life. And, nurses in particular, I work with a lot of nurses. What are the hidden stressors in your life? What are the things that you have control over? And then how can you start to quiet that ego mind, that fight or flight that takes us down this crazy train? How can we quiet that and really connect to our soul and the messages of our soul, which are really what are going to help us lead our best life and show up our best selves? So that's what I do now, and I love it. And I work from home, and I work, I teach in a school of nursing because I really wanted to show nursing the holistic, the new generation, a holistic way of approaching health and well-being from 5 aspects, not just physical, it's not just nutritional, it's not just environmental, there's an emotional piece to it. And because a lot of medicine, we don't look at the root cause. And if you look at the root cause of a lot of illnesses, stress is the root cause of a lot of illnesses. And particularly emotional and spiritual stress, this disconnect, people not knowing who they are and what they need, and losing themselves because they're following all the shoulds, and they're trying to be something that they think they're supposed to be, instead of really connecting with themselves and understanding, who am I and what do I need in this moment for me to be well? So,
So I think that's wonderful, and that's great that you were able to marry everything and take what could have been a tragedy, what could have been
yeah,
a moment of pain, and turn it into a triumph, and then
yeah,
use it to help you to help others
yeah,
through your business.
yeah.
So
And I do a
what's
lot of health advocacy with my business too, like people that are struggling with navigating the system and understanding, what to do or where to go. So yeah, no, you're right. I believe in making lemonade out of those lemons.
so what has been your biggest challenge in starting your business?
um, Really, I think my biggest challenge is staying in alignment with what I know to be true, staying in alignment with what my soul is telling me. There's a lot of people that want to take their problems and say, "Here, fix me," and give
Yeah,
somebody else the authority over them, or to get, or to hand their problems over and have somebody else fix them. And I think my biggest challenge is really getting people to see that I'm not the one doing the work. I'm not the one who's going to fix you. That, first of all, there's nothing broken. I am here to reconnect you to you, to teach you what the whispers are that your mind tells you, that your body tells you, that your soul tells you, and help you understand that. That's why I say I'm a soul connector. It's like I'm translating at first, but I don't want somebody to be dependent on me to be healthy and well. I want them to take ownership of their own lives and to learn, what do I need? How do I learn that language? Jen's going to teach me that language. I might be the translator in the beginning, but then I'm teaching you the language, so you don't need me anymore. But you
right.
got to own it. And I think the biggest challenge is people don't want to do the hard stuff. They want the easy road. They want the quick fix and the pill. And lasting health and well-being is not a quick fix. There is no pill for that. You need to do the work. You need to do the work of self-reflection and you need to be accountable for your own life and your own choices.
And that's tough for a lot of people, when you're talking to people from any aspect of their health, physical, spiritual, mental. When you talk about that you mean I'm the one in control? Yes, you are. And I try to get my clients to see that um, it can't be a pill for everything. Do I
No.
think medications help? Of course I do. Do I
But I
think
think
they're
we
necessary?
become
In some
dependent on
cases,
them
yes,
sometime, you
we
know?
do. It becomes too easy.
Right.
I used to teach the drug ed classes for teenagers, and one of the scenes, and I'm dating myself as well. But if you remember the very first movie, the before they made the remake of Fright Night, and Charlie is scared the vampire's out to get him, right? And he's yelling and screaming. And mom comes to the door. Charlie, are you okay? And he's like, no, I just had a nightmare. It's fine. She said, oh, do you need a Valium?
Mm.
And I thought, who gives a Valium for a nightmare?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's our go-to. And I see that time and time again. It's like, oh, Elle Woods, Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
And she's upset. Her boyfriend dumps her. She wants to go to law school, and her best friend goes, "Can't you just take a Percocet?"
Yeah.
I like that's our go-to for everything.
Yeah. Well,
And
because
it's
we
like,
don't want to be uncomfortable. People do not
no,
like discomfort. They want to get out of that discomfort. But that's where your power lies, is being having the courage to sit through that discomfort and find your true power inside of you, which is you get to make the choices of what do you need in this moment. That discomfort is telling you something. It's informing you.
it's the same way in your business.
Yeah.
I see that a lot of time with business owners. They don't want to do the discomfort, the work, the figuring out, the mindset shift,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
things that
The
need to happen
sales.
for you
Yeah.
to. Yeah, you got to move from employee to entrepreneur. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
And sales shouldn't be a dirty word,
Mm-mm.
because what sales really is and should be is an offer of help. If you're helping someone
Yeah.
and you're providing a service that
Yeah.
they need,
Yeah.
you're helping. You're not selling. It's a way you think of it, and a
Right.
mindset shift for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're almost out of our time. So I wanted to ask you a last question. If you had a piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, what would it be?
To be careful about listening to everybody else's shoulds and supposed to's, and really stay in alignment with what you know to be true for you, and really let your passion, your intention lead, because it's really easy to get pulled off your path when you're kind of stuck in the numbers and the ego starts to take over, where you think you want this outcome and this person is going to tell you how to get that outcome. It's there are so many different ways of doing stuff, and the right way only you know. So stay true to you and to your path.
Definitely, definitely. So you have a promotion for our listeners. You have your free 5 steps to shift negative mindset and to begin to thrive.
Yes.
Um, how would our listeners get a hold of your free gift and get in contact with you?
I'm going to give you the link for the free gift. But if you go on to we can go onto my Instagram, and Instagram is just at Jen Wren Tolo. And if you follow me on Instagram, you can look at the profile and download right there's a link in my profile. You can download that right there if you don't have the links or access to the show notes here. And people can get a hold of me by reaching out to me, Jen, Jen, at Jennifer Wren, Wren, Tolo.com.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. That's www.jenniferrentolo.com. Please go ahead and reach out to her, and I will be putting her link. She did leave her link. I'll be putting the link into the show notes for those that want to talk with her further about stress management, personal health journeys, all these different things. Whatever you have, be sure to reach out to her. And I thank you for tuning in and listening.
Thank
Um,
you.
Thank you, and you've been a wonderful guest, and I'm looking forward to being able to do something with you in the future, because I think there's going to be some synergy there. Um, Please don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Nurse Shark Academy channel. Also, please go ahead and share this content. If you're listening to us on Podbean or wherever you get your podcast, please give us a rating and let us know how we did and how we can improve. And if you have a nurse that is out there and you want to, if you are a nurse and you think you'll be a good guest on the show, reach out to us at the nursesharkacademy.biz. We'll be happy to have a conversation with you. And don't forget that we also have um, special segments that are available for our patrons. So if you'd like to be a patron, head on over to our channel on Podbean and you can sign up and be a patron. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye. Nurses, are you ready for more? My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and the freedom to live your life on your own terms. Assisting you in achieving your goals through tailored advice, continuous learning, and a collaborative approach is at the heart of everything I do. Stop being eaten alive. Come feel the sun. Be a nurse shark. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the NurseSharkAcademy.biz.